Well, the process had to do with having the support of as many countries as possible. And there were a few competitors to begin with. The most serious one was my friend Agustin Carsten, who is now the governor of the Central Bank of Mexico. So he was zigzagging the world in one direction, and I was zigzagging the world in the other direction to make sure that we did not meet. And yet we had to cover the same, essentially the same authorities and the same countries around the world. So I never traveled as extensively as I did at that time. And then that was followed, once the shortlist was arrived at, that was followed by an interview with members of the board, which was quite an experience, because that board still today only has one. It's a board of 24 members, and there is only one woman on the board there are a few alternates, but as far as members are concerned, there is only one female member, and that's the US representative. But that day, Meg had to attend the Article 4 review with Treasury and the Fed. So she was not sitting at the table, as a result of which I was interviewed by 24 men, which was, an interesting phenomenon. When you are yourself Minister of Finance, you've handled the presidency by France of the G20, you've gone through the crisis of 2008, 2009, and there you are facing, 24 very courteous, respectful, and nice men. It came as a shock, yeah.
And did you have to cram? I mean, was it a difficult learning process to get through that?
It was exhausting, because prior to the 24 board setting, I had to spend half an hour with each of the 24 over a course of two days. So that was a bit...
Nothing comes easy, even in your life.
No.
And it's interesting, I mean, some career choices have been made, or at least one was made for you, in that the male-dominated French school that churns out French politicians and bureaucrats and so forth. You were turned down twice by that school. Mm-hmm. Talk about that, but also some career choices, decisions that you've had to make along the way, and what was the best advice you ever got?
Well, I think having been turned down twice, first time for incompetency, the second for for having missed the deadline.
What do you mean by that, incompetency? In what
way?
Well,
I wasn't prepared enough. I hadn't studied hard enough, and I was in love that year, so I spent a lot more time. So, and the second time around, I missed the deadline, and I think that was a, missed, whether that was a good turnout of things or not, I don't know, but suffice to say that I went back a few years later, and I was asked to give a speech to those young, bright kids from ENA. And I have to say that day I felt really, really powerful. I had flunked, and there I was coming to tell them about the legalization of society, or some really obscure matter that they had no interest in, actually. But, two things that I take away from that is you fail somewhere, bounce back, get on with it, have a few drinks or whatever takes you away from that, but move on. Don't start, don't feel sorry about yourself, don't lose confidence, just move on, move to something else. The second time I felt exactly the same is when I interviewed in Paris at the time for one of the top law firms. And I had all the credentials, and I had done all the right things, and the resume was fine, and I was behaving properly and all the rest of it. And the hiring partner, who was also the managing partner, said to me, well, we'll take you. We'll take you as an associate, but don't expect ever to make partnership. And that was a really, really very high-standing, excellent law firm. And I said, well, why is that? That was back in 79. And he said, well, because you're a woman. So again, I packed my things and I just run. I didn't want to have anything to do with these people. So sometimes you have to pick your fight and really persist. But on other occasions, if people don't deserve you, just go, move on. Yeah.